Howdy, howdy. Welcome, welcome. Happy Sunday to all of you. Hope you're having a good day. Real quick, before we get started, I am expecting one of my fish tanks to get here today. Actually, the fish tank that I've been waiting for. So it said on the Amazon order that they might need help bringing it in here. And knowing my luck, they're going to show up uh, right when I'm live. So I might have to step away. I guess we'll see when that happens. Anyway, we've got a little bit of an itinerary here today. First things first, we're going to go over some poison dart frogs, some do's, some don'ts. We're going to talk about the advantages of vivariums and terrariums versus regular fish tanks. We're going to talk about some basic terrarium maintenance. And we're going to talk about some common mistakes when building a terrarium. Looks like I've got a couple comments, which is pretty new. Normally it takes a minute. Alan Potter says, howdy. Howdy to you, Alan. And Jimmy says, man, I love your channel. You're way better than Dr. Plant, in my opinion. Honestly, that was one of those channels that I took a lot of inspiration from originally. I really appreciate that, Jimmy. I don't know if I agree with that, but it was his original vampire crab terrarium that I saw that inspired me to get into terrarium building in the first place, which is how I got into doing the one that's right here behind me, the volcano paludarium. We're also going to discuss some of the future projects that I've got coming up. And I'm going to do a couple of subscriber shout outs to some people that have been active in my community. Huge shout out back to you, Jimmy. Appreciate that. He unfortunately harms his animals for a better video. Oh, I guess I didn't really realize. I haven't really watched any of his videos, to be fair, since originally seeing the terrarium that he made for the vampire crabs and I think they were morning geckos. I don't know, but that's unfortunate to hear that. I mean, you shouldn't harm any animals for subscriber enjoyment, I guess. I personally like to build harmonious as best as I can for every animal in there. Anyway, let's get started, huh? Some do's and some don'ts of some poison dart frogs. Do keep the terrarium humid. All right, so easy ways to do that is to mist down your terrarium 1 or 2 times a day. If you have a mesh top to your terrarium, you're going to want to put something over the top to keep some of that humidity in, but you don't want to cover it all the way so there's still some airflow. Personally, what works best for me is to just put an acrylic sheet over the top about 2/3 of the way, and then that still allows for some airflow. Jimmy says, but his vampire crab and morning gecko paludarium is amazing, and your vampire paludarium is amazing. Well, I certainly appreciate that. It was definitely one of my favorite builds to make, and the vampire crabs are super cool to observe. When I actually see them, that is, it usually takes a while for them to come out because they're kind of shy, and they're also nocturnal, so they do most of their work at night. However, I actually got a couple of motion activated to Wi-Fi connecting cameras that I'm going to place in there. That's this terrarium. Sorry, I'm looking at this in the reverse way in my camera. I'm going to put those in there and see if I can get some footage of the vampire crabs doing their thing at night. So I'm pretty pumped about that. LI New York 7514 Mini Minion. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Good morning to you. Welcome you to the stream. Glad to have you here. Let's see. Also, another thing that we want to consider when you're building your dart frog terrarium is you don't actually want to let the substrate get soaked through all the time. You want to allow your dart frogs to actually dry out their feet. So the best way to do that is to put leaf litter. I recommend oak leaf litter on top of the substrate, and then obviously you're going to want to build a drainage layer. Isacho Silva, hey man, I'm planning to make a 36 by 18 by 36 paludarium. Any tips? The first thing that I would say is check into what kind of animal you're going to be putting in there and then build your entire terrarium specifically to that animal's needs, which is one of the things we're going to discuss later on, but we can talk about it now. Um, you always want to have a vision of what animal you're creating your terrarium for, so that way you can optimize everything to that specific animal. So, you can make sure that you got the right plants, that there isn't something that might be toxic to the animal. You can make sure that if they need a water section, that you get the water section in there correctly. Um, Putting in mourning geckos and dart frogs. Personally, I don't know of if it's a good idea to mix the two. You could get cross contamination from their feces if they have different, bacteria that they keep in their gut. That's something you might want to research a little more. I haven't personally had mourning geckos, so I really can't speak to that. But as far as poison dart frogs, you're going to want to make sure that you don't have any sitting water. You want to have a good drainage layer. If you put a water feature in there, you want to make sure that that water has a way of getting filtered. So that way you don't get ammonia spikes and bacteria buildup in that water. And you also want to make sure that you have a lot of plants in there. If you're researching plants, I suggest going to frogdaddy.com. That's where I did all of my research. And even if the plants are out of stock, you can probably source them from somewhere else. But he's got great little summaries of each plant, and they're all going to be good plants to use for dart frogs because that's specific to dart frogs. So frogdaddy.com is a great source. Or you could also get the wet moss mix for the dart frogs and put that in your terrarium. And that solves most of your problems because there's about 13 different mosses and about 13 different micro plants that can grow. And they'll grow in the spot most suitable for that specific plant in your terrarium. So it does a lot of the work for you. And it leaves you with a really lush looking terrarium. Back to the leaf litter. Don't go outside and pick up leaf litter from outside. It might be tempting to, but you don't know what's going to be on those leaves. You could bring in insects that you don't necessarily want in your terrarium. There might be pesticides or fertilizers that one of your neighbors sprayed on their yard, and or the insects that come on those plants might have ingested both and poison dart frogs, ironically enough, right? Sacho Silva says, yep, I'm planning to get the moss mix and also get most of my materials from a reptile expo in January. That's solid. I mean, there doesn't get better than that, especially because you can talk specifically to those individuals that are selling the plants, and they might know a little bit more about what's suitable for poison dart frogs and what's not. My recommendation is do some research ahead of time. I recommend frogdaddy.com and go in there with a shopping list of plants that you're looking for, and then the wet moss mix. You just can't go wrong with that. LL New York says, I just did a makeover on my 18-18-24. I did house my breeding pair of Azurus. I sold them in March. I'm hopefully getting a pair of spotted Ufaga Pomilio El Dorado from Lynn at Fern's Frogs. Hey, that'd be awesome. I hope you do. I think it's funny because I think a lot of people start out with the Azurus. It's kind of like the gold standard for poison dart frogs. I was definitely drawn to them. I was a little bit impatient because I really wanted to get maybe like the New Rivers, or I knew I was going to get Tinctoriuses, maybe the Blancos, but I couldn't find any, and I was ready for frogs. So Azurus it is, but hey, they're awesome frogs, and I can't complain at the end of the day, right? Let's see, where are we at here? Another don't is don't mix dart frogs. It might be tempting to do that, but you could you're probably going to deal with aggression because dart frogs are territorial by nature. And you could also get crossbreeding, which can affect the line and healthiness of the frogs. So they might be less resistant to disease because they've got less strong genetics. And like I said, a lot of dart frogs are territorial, so they might actually end up fighting, and it's not something that you want. Do watch them and admire them, but don't touch your poison dart frogs. Not because they're poisonous. That's a common myth. well, they are out in nature, but not in captivity. If you buy them captive bred, they're not dangerous to you. It's actually the plants out in nature, or not plants, the insects that they eat in nature that gives them their toxic properties. However, ironically enough, when we touch the poison dart frogs with our hands, we're toxic to them because of the oils that we have on our skins, possible cleaning agents, or who knows what you've got that you're carrying on your hands. They're super sensitive, and if you get it on their skin, it could hurt them. So if you ever deal with a scenario where one of your frogs jumps out, I've had it happen a couple times with my Ranny Tomeas, where I just didn't see them on a plant when I opened it to do some maintenance. I grab them as quickly as I can. I try not to touch, as little contact with my hand as possible. And then I use my mister with some distilled water and rinse them off as best as I can to hopefully wash anything that I might have had on my hands off of them. New York says, I just put a Frog Daddy order in yesterday. Cleanup crew and oak leaf litter. Hey, awesome. That's where I get pretty much 95% of everything that I have in here for plants and animals. Sacho Silver, I always have to explain that they're not poisonous whenever talking to friends or family. Yeah, a lot of people are blown away by the fact that you can own poison dart frogs, and it's kind of fun to let them think for a little while that you're dealing with a deadly animal in your house, but not really, right? Excuse me. All right. We already kind of discussed the don't let water sit around stagnant in your poison dart frog terrarium. Like I said, you can get bacteria on that. And do your research on the plants that you're going to use. We kind of jumped the gun on my list here a little bit. And then I just have reiteration websites to check out. Even if you don't end up buying your plants from the website, it is frogdaddy.com, and Josh's Frogs has got a pretty decent selection of plants that you can look into as well. And I highly recommend getting some bromeliads, especially if you're planning on breeding your poison dart frogs so they can deposit their eggs and their tadpoles in the center with a pool of water. And then obviously, I always highly recommend the wet moss mix as well. So let's talk about some of the advantages of having a terrarium or vivarium versus having a traditional fish tank. The first thing that I love about the terrariums is that they're generally lightweight compared to a fish tank. So it's a lot easier to move them. You can put them on furniture that's less accommodating than you would be able to get away with the fish tank, for example. If I scoot off to the side here, you can see that my I can never get this right. That my poison dart frog terrarium's literally just sitting on a fold-up table right now. You would never be able to get away with a aquarium, at least not feeling safe about it. And then it's easier to move. If you ever have to move, all you got to do is get your frogs out, drain out your drainage layer, and I mean, I can lift most of these by myself. The only one that takes two people is the volcano paludarium, and that's because I built the drainage layer with rocks because I didn't quite know what I was doing yet, so it's unnecessarily heavy. New York says my 36 by 18 by 24 enclosure that has my group of Philobades, bicolor, or Raba, also from Lynn at Fern's Frogs. I just put organic magnolia leaf litter in it, and man, what a difference. It looks awesome. Yeah, it does look really cool. It makes it all look very natural, and you get a really cool color combination because usually you don't have a lot of tans or grays in your terrarium, so it really stands out. And they kind of almost shimmer gold when they get freshly misted. So I personally love that as well. Plus, they smell great. Isacho Silver, I'm in between Terribilis and beautiful Randy Tomea Fantastica that I discovered from your channel. I personally fell in love with the Fantastica. That was the first frog I ever got, and I'm never going back. They're also not very loud when they do their calls in the morning. So, they're not super loud frogs, which is also nice. It's just kind of like a buzzing sound, but you wouldn't even hear it outside of this room, even with the door open. Let's see, where are we at here? So you have a lot of potential to house lesser known animals in a terrarium or paludarium than you would ever be able to do with a aquarium. Now there are exotic fish, but you're almost never going to get the reaction from a fish tank that you would from a terrarium. And that's just because this hobby is fairly new and fish tanks have been around forever. Most of the time when people come over here and they don't know that I do terrarium building, they're absolutely blown away by these things. They didn't even know this was a possibility. And then you take it a step further and they see that there's exotic poison dart frogs with super brilliant colors, or vampire crabs. And, one of the things I plan on getting is a crocodile skink, which literally looks like a mini dinosaur or like a little dragon. So, yeah, you definitely can blow some people away with it. And it's a lot more unique, in my opinion, than just a fish tank. That being said, I am setting up a fish tank soon. I have a pair of Ranitomeya Southern Variabilis, and their calling is really low. I think that's just kind of a Ranitomeya trait. I might be mistaken about it, but it's definitely an added bonus because I don't want it to be super loud at my house all the time. Another thing about vivariums versus and terrariums versus traditional fish tanks is they smell great compared to a fish tank. A fish tank can smell pretty bad, especially the saltwater ones, from what I've heard. Whereas a terrarium, when done right, literally smells like the forest floor. So it's almost like having a bunch of air fresheners in your house, which you can't beat that. And you're also going to have more colorful enclosure than you would a fish tank, because usually you're pretty limited unless you like get really into your aquascaping, but then you're going to have to get into the nitrates and go pretty hard on maintaining those plants. Whereas with the terrarium, you can put quite a different variation of plants in there with different textures and different colors. And I mean, I don't know. I think it blows it out of the water for me. And then, I actually wrote this on the wrong page, but one more do for your poison dart frogs is you want to make sure that you get supplements. You want to make sure you refrigerate them and change them out every 6 months. And you want to make sure you do a calcium dusting every single feeding. I feed them every day, once a day, flightless fruit flies. And that is the Rapashi is the brand that I use. So the calcium plus every 2 weeks, I do the Super Pig, which is a carotenoid supplement, and then also every 2 to 3 weeks, depending on honestly just if I forget or not. But at least once a month, I do vitamin A plus, usually about once every 3 weeks. All right. So let's talk about what kind of maintenance that you're going to have to do for your terrariums. Most of the time, you're going to want to mist it about 2 to 3 times a day. That's as far as I go. I'm sorry. Any hits as to videos coming out soon? Yeah, I've got some. I've got some videos that I'll be posting. I'll get into that a little bit later. I made a little list actually, but some things that I'm going to do is a full room tour of my terrariums, and then I'm going to do another one with common mistakes that people make when building terrariums, as well as some terrarium do's and don'ts. And I'm honestly have been going pretty hard on the YouTube shorts, mainly just because my TikTok channel's been taking off, and that's been a nice little supplementation to my funds because I'm kind of thugging on a budget right now because I kind of dished out a lot of money for enclosures. I've got 3 on the way. My girlfriend actually asked me to build her a low maintenance terrarium for her tattoo studio. There's probably not going to be any land animals other than the cleanup crew. It's going to be mainly a moss wall. I was going to talk about this a little later, but I bought this little hobbit home looking thing that I'm going to build into the wall. And then I'm going to do like a little meandering river. So I bought this little bridge that I'm going to connect a path to. And I haven't quite really fleshed it out in my mind yet, but it's the same tank size as my vampire crab terrarium, just about a foot taller. So we'll see about that. I've got a Carolina Customs tank on the way. That one is going to be for my crocodile skink build. That one is a special order though, so it's going to take a little while. It said anywhere from December to well, late December to early January, and it's looking like it's going to be here early January. And then, like I said, that fish tank is supposed to get here today. It's a 78-gallon fish tank, rimless. I kind of went hard on it because I wanted to get the highest quality I could find, and I spent like $1,000 on it. So I'm excited to see that. I still got to put the uh, stand for it together, and I kicked my girlfriend out of her leisure room, and I'm slowly taking that over for my terrarium build, so she's gonna have to deal with that. So anyway, back to the maintenance of terrariums. Cleaning the glass, I use a razor. I wet it down with distilled water, scrape off carefully, of course, so not to scratch the glass, any of the algae, and then I use a paper towel and more distilled water to wipe down the glass. As far as the actual tank goes, minus occasional trimming of the plants, which you're going to probably have to trim a little bit heavier up front, but then the plants kind of figure out that if they grow too high that they get snipped down. So they kind of maintain themselves, honestly. But apart from keeping the plants from overgrowing, your cleanup crew is going to do most of your maintenance for you. They'll eat the decaying plant matter as well as your waste, potential waste from any animals as well. And then they're also going to act as the fertilizer as well. So you don't actually have to fertilize the plants other than maybe an initial fertilizer, where I personally prefer to use the Amazonia 80A. And I just put that in there initially, as well as some horticultural charcoal. And then the decaying plant matter and animal waste will sort itself out and be your fertilizer moving on from there. Let's see where we're at here. And then, oh, you're going to want to change out the lights every 3 to 4 years, depending on what lighting system you use. I have Josh's Frogs, and um, that's about every 3 to 4 years before you got to change it out so the UV stays strong. Asacho Silva, where can I get that fertilizer you use? I got it on Amazon. If you want to, when the video ends, I can link the ADA Amazonia. It's aquarium fertilizer, but it works great for terrarium, so that's what I use. But I'll link it in the description after this live is over. Let's go over some common mistakes for terrarium builds. So this one I see quite a lot is people start the terrarium building process before they actually know what animal they plan to put in it. So then they got to redo things, they got to make adjustments, and in the end, it's never quite perfect for the specific animal that you wanted to put in there. So I always recommend figure out what animal you want to use first, or what you want to house in there first, I should say, and then build everything specifically to their needs. And that'll also make your long-term maintenance a lot easier as well. If using spray if using spray foam, score the glass with silicone. So a lot of people will forget to put some silicone on the glass first, let that cure. So that'll give the spray foam something to attach to. Otherwise, it's going to slowly detach from the glass and it'll slip off the back of your enclosure. And it's going to be a sad day because you're essentially going to have to tear the whole thing down and restart. So definitely make sure you score the glass with some aquarium safe silicone. Let it cure all the way, then do your spray foam. Adding animals before the tank cycles is another common mistake. They're going to, depending on what kind of animal you have, is they could trample your plants before they get a chance to take root and establish themselves. Your cleanup crew might not have time to establish itself before the animal that might see them as a potential prey item comes in and eats said cleanup crew before it has a chance to really take off and reproduce. And there's depending on what terrarium's environment you're building, if you're doing a humid environment, which most terrariums are going to be, you're going to more than likely have a mold breakout initially, and that's totally normal, nothing to worry about. And your springtails will take care of that for you. but you want to give it a chance to fully cycle first. So that way you're not, exposing the animal to mold, which might not be good for it. Too small of a drainage layer. This one's a huge one. So also one of those ones that you are going to have a hard time fixing after the fact. You want to make sure you give it about 3 to 4 inches. And you also want to make sure that there is a way to drain said drainage layer in case it gets, you know, too bogged down with water. So if the water level exceeds your drainage layer, it's going to get into your substrate. The substrate's going to start to smell and rot, and then you're going to have a whole bunch of problems on your hands. So always make sure you have a way to drain that water, and make sure you build that drainage layer up nice and high. Oh, that brings us to our next one, overwatering. You can kill your plants if you overwater them. And depending on what plants you're using, some of them you're going to want to make sure that there's good drainage away from the roots, because not every plant wants to have their roots exposed to water 24/7. And then don't place your terrarium in direct sunlight. So you could actually cook your terrarium. It's kind of like that magnifying effect, where if you use a magnifier with the sunlight, it's going to increase the heat in there substantially, and it'll make it really hard to regulate the heat in your terrarium and the temperature. And it could also kill your plants, even worse, your animals. So definitely keep it away from the sunlight. It'll also increase the algae growth in your terrarium if you put it in the sunlight directly. And another huge one is not letting the silicone or whatever adhesives you're using gas off properly. So if you don't let your terrarium gas off completely, you're exposing everything in that terrarium that you're putting in it to potentially harmful chemicals. So rule of thumb, if you can't smell it anymore, and you'll know what I'm talking about, it's got a very strong smell at first, nothing to worry about. But give it a week or two and make sure that wherever you're letting it cure is well ventilated as well. New York says, my makeover build, I use sponge filter for my drainage and substrate. Troy Goldberg uses it. So far, so good. I'm really happy with the results. Yeah, I actually used a combination of aquarium filter foam, which is the same as the sponge filter, as well as the aquarium divider grid. It's super lightweight, and it obviously lets the water get through, and the sponge filter lets the plant's roots take hold in there as well, which is awesome. So definitely recommend that. And I think you're heading in the right direction with that. I haven't watched any of Troy's videos yet, but I've heard his name thrown around the hobby. I should check his stuff out. I wanted to give a couple of subscriber shout outs, people that have been commenting and boosting my algorithm. I really appreciate that. So Sweet and Low 718 has been all over my video comment sections lately. If you're watching this, I appreciate you. Juiced 1094. This one's a long-time commentator, and has been a subscriber from when I had like 100 subscribers on my channel. So I appreciate you. And I noticed that you've commented over the years, going on 2 years now. Thank you very much. The Glosco has been a newer subscriber, but very active in my comments. I appreciate that. And Yo Mama Mama -ND2KT, newer subscriber, active in my comments section. Shout out to you. I appreciate you. Let's go over some commonly asked questions. Are dart frogs poisonous? Yes and no. Not in captivity, but definitely so in nature. They get their toxins from, it's presumed, a species of ants that lives in the wild, but I don't think anyone really knows for sure because of the wide variety of different insects that are out there. Tad, I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name here. Tad and Newton Hoekstra. I like how you have your notebook in front of you. Yeah, absolutely. I don't have this all memorized, and I'm trying to keep some sort of flow to this video because I'm a little bit ADD and I'm all over the place. So I gotta have a list. Thanks for the comment. I appreciate you watching. Where was I at here? Honestly, can't even read what I wrote there. But what if one of them escapes? And this is in reference to my poison dart frogs. You're gonna have to grab him or her, most likely with your hand, get them back into the terrarium as quickly as possible, and then use distilled water to rinse them off because you don't want to let them get chemicals on their skin or oils that we secrete from our hands. And then I actually see what I wrote now. Can you touch them? No, you shouldn't touch them for the very obvious reason of what I just said. And then I get questions about this one all the time. What if your fruit flies escape? Well, it happens all the time, much to the dismay of my girlfriend. Actually, I ran low on my fruit fly cultures about a week and a half ago, and I had to resort to going to PetSmart to buy one of their fruit fly cultures. And I opened it up, and theirs had grown wings that they could utilize, and so now I've got an infestation of fruit flies in my house that are flying all over the place. I get traps for them right here. I don't know if you can see that or not, but there's a ton of fruit flies stuck to the sticky trap. It's just an old can with some apple cider vinegar in there. And also, you can use a vacuum to vacuum them off the ceiling as well. Um, it's Dutch. Your pronunciation wasn't that bad. Well, we're kind of cousins, actually. I'm originally from Germany. I was born in Berlin when I was 8. Also kann ich auch noch ein bisschen Deutsch sprechen. Also kommt es für mich ein bisschen leichter, als du denkst. Where are we at here? Does the cleanup crew ever escape? I haven't seen it, but to be honest with you, they wouldn't last long out there if they did, because they require a high humidity environment. And if they get out, my room isn't going to accommodate to them, so they wouldn't last long. The same could be said, sadly, for my dart frogs. So it's important that I always make sure I open the doors carefully and don't let them jump out. Will a razor blade scratch my glass? Not if you're careful. That hasn't happened to me. And uh, who makes the best terrarium tanks? In my opinion, Carolina Customs is by far the best. They use tempered glass. It's a little bit heavier, definitely a little bit more pricey, but definitely well worth it. And let's see, best place to buy plants. Like I said, Frog Daddy or Reptile Expos would be a good place as well. And then, is it expensive to own dart frogs? Yes and no. Up front, definitely. It's going to cost quite a bit of money for the initial setup. You're talking whatever you use for a drainage layer, so aquarium filter foam, aquarium divider grid. You could possibly use volcanic glass. Oh, I think that's my fish tank. So 1 second. Howdy. Good. Oh, sweet. Got my fish tank for me. Oh, sweet. Need a hand? Oh, sweet. Back up some milk. Sorry about that. It might be a little slick. You guys having a good day? All right. Oh, sweet. All right, watch your step there. She's nosy. You can just slap her down right here. That's cool. Right here? Yeah, that'll work. Thank you very much. Of course. Sweet. What is this thing? It's a fish tank. A fish tank? Yeah. That's why you pop your head in here. I'll show you. I do like terrariums and stuff. Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm actually live right now, so. Oh, sorry about that.
Oh, wow. That's that whole setup.
Doom.
Yeah. Where are you going to put that one in at?
It's going in the other room over here later on, but I got to do like the stand and all that for it. Appreciate you, fellas. Thank you very much. Have a good one. Oh, yeah. Yeah. For sure. Thank you. Awesome. Good deal. Take care. Thank you. Be careful out there. Woo! Sorry about that, but I've been waiting for that for like a month and it's here. So I'm excited to crack into that. Hopefully no cracks in the glass. I have no idea where I was at. Let me reread. Oh yeah. Back to the poison dart frogs. So is it expensive to own dart frogs up front? Yes. Long term, not really. So drainage layer, substrate, the leaf litter. What the hell was that? Leaf litter, rocks. If you're going to put like dragonstone or something else to decorate in there, the frogs themselves. If you decide to go with a misting system, or if I personally hand mist. It's a lot more fun for me personally, more rewarding. I know I'm missing a lot of things. I totally lost my train of thought from that, so sorry about that. Upcoming projects. My fish tank, which obviously is here now. I got to build the stand for it, and then I'm going to put that on there, and I've got a whole crazy idea list of things that I'm going to do. So I'm actually going to build a custom backdrop to make it look like a rock formation out of styrofoam with a cement finish. So that cement should help weigh it down. Then I'll silicone it to the glass. And then I'm going to actually build above the water section about as tall as the land section is, or as tall as my bracketed lights that I'm putting above it will allow. And I ordered a whole bunch of miniature model kits. They're like little Japanese villages and estates that look really, really cool. And the idea is going to be to build a Japanese style seaside village with like a meandering river that spills into my fish tank, doubles as my aquarium filter. It's going to get crazy. All right. Taden Nuden Hoekstra. Fish tank, I just had mine fertig. Haha. Which CO2 are you going to use? So I'm not really sure on that one yet. I got to figure that out still. I'm still in the extensive planning section or stage of all of this, but it's a 78 gallon. I'm going to go heavily planted in the water section, and I'm going to get Galaxy Raspora or Pearl Danios, depending on where you look. They call them different things. A bunch of pencil fish and some loaches to combat any potential snail outbreaks. And then I was going to get pea puffers, which are tiny little, the smallest freshwater puffer fish available. But then I found out that they can be kind of aggressive. So I'm probably going to skip those and then possibly rescue one of the beta fishes from my local fish store or PetSmart, actually, because I always feel bad for them when I see them. I know technically I'm not really solving the problem by buying a beta fish from them because they're always in those little cups. But at the same time, I'd be making a world of difference to that one beta fish. So there's a trade-off, right? Yeah, so I'm going to get like a fog machine I'm going to build into the mountainside, because I'm going to do like a mountainside with a moss mix. Guys, this is really hard to explain. It's going to make a lot more sense if you guys stick around for a few months when I finally get this project done. But this is by far going to be my most ambitious project I've ever attempted. But if I do this right, I'm going to have a seaside village that lights up at night with a fog that hangs over the water section. And then I'm also going to get like a little boat that I'm going to anchor with like a real little metal anchor and a chain to the ground, to the floor of my terrarium. So it'll be a little floating boat as well. And then I'm going to use a clear aquarium sealant. It's actually a pond sealant to seal all of those they're called doll houses on Amazon, but they're like super intricate. Like each one of these little models is going to take me every bit of a day and a half to put together and probably have me ready to pull my hair out. But it's going to look absolutely insane if I do this right. So that's another one of those projects I'm working on. And then, like I said, my girlfriend wants me to build her a terrarium for her tattoo shop. So I'll be working on that as well. So that's pretty much what I got today. I got to go crack open my fish tank and make sure that there's no cracks in the glass. Huge shout out to everyone that was here today. This is by far the most engagement I've ever had. Normally, I'm just talking to myself. So anyone that commented, I appreciate you. I'm going to start going live on Sunday. I'm aiming for 11 o'clock every single Sunday, so it'll be a little bit more consistent. If you guys got questions, don't hesitate to hit me up in my comments. You can email me at alternateaquatics@gmail.com. Or just write your questions down and hit me in the live stream. Hope you guys had a good one. Hope you have a good Sunday. And we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.